Oh man, who doesn't want a modern, a very fast built and long lasting shed in their backyard? On the build show today, we're gonna show you how we built this thing start to finish. I've got some really good details that are gonna make sure this shed is gonna last. And I was able to get everything very quickly, all in one package from my friends at FirstSource. Now everything, plans, the whole shebang is available for the shed for you to build as well. Today's particular episode is sponsored by our friends at Simpson. Let's get going.
A Build Original Series, in partnership with Builders FirstSource. The Risinger Build.
All right, y'all, shed build starts right here. This basically looks like a ground level deck. I do want to mention though that it's really important when you're building a shed to really last. You know, I want this shed to be around literally 50 years from now. I had some sheds at some old houses of mine that had a ton of rot at the base, and they weren't that old. They were, 25 years old. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how are we going to make sure this shed many decades from now is still providing service to this house. I mean, if I expect this house to be around in 100 years, why wouldn't I build a shed that's going to last at least that long, or maybe almost that long? So a couple things we want to start with. Of course, all of our Simpson connections we need to think about ahead of time. Of course, you can typically get off the shelf at your local retailer hot dipped galvanized, which can definitely work. We chose to do a lot of stainless on this project, so we made sure we got with my BFS rep and ordered this ahead of time. Another product that we decided to use on this project that I've used before is these Tuff blocks. These are really handy. This is basically a plastic block that's structural, that's going to sit right at grade. You can either put a 4x4 post right in the center here, or you can see we're just dropping in our joists right on the center here, and they fit really nicely. The other beauty of this is we're using our Simpson joist hangers, but in fact, because we've got these Tuff blocks on each location, we almost didn't really need a whole lot of joist hanger because these are going to be really carrying the load on the deck. Now this deck is a little bit smaller than what I've done in the past. We had some neighborhood restrictions, and also we had some backyard size. So this is a 12x8 deck, but you could actually very simply take this deck from 12 to 16 or to 20. We really want to build decks in 4-foot increments so we can utilize our 4x8 sheet goods correctly and wisely without having a bunch of waste. So, we could go 10 foot wide if we wanted to, but this 8x12 is a great size. Now the walls on this project are all ready framed. We had BFS do a quick model of this on ready frame, super easy. So basically all the walls were pre-cut, and you'll see that the top and bottom plates are labeled. My headers were pre-cut. I mean, we literally framed the walls in this project in like 30 minutes. I'm not even sure we got a ton of video of these getting framed because the guys got them done super, super quick. Talking lumber for a minute, remember I mentioned we really want this shed to be around many decades from now. Almost all the rot function on sheds, and certainly houses, happens in the bottom 2 feet of the house. And in particular, this being a ground level deck, this deck might as well be underground, and very likely will be by the time someone mulches or puts grass in or whatever. So I chose to go to a higher level of pressure treat than I could get off the shelf. Generally speaking, when you go to the lumber yard, when you go to Builders FirstSource or some other place that's building decks, you've got ground contact lumber. I chose to go a step further and get this type. This is called critical structural components. That's actually the label on here, which is a higher level of pressure treating. Now there's a bunch of different varieties of pressure treating. I won't get into all that, but this one in particular uses copper as the agent. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, micronized copper azul compounds. And this is a 0.23 PCF. That's basically pounds per square foot. And I don't know exactly how that works, but the idea is when it's put into a solution that has that copper in it, more of it is soaked in. And I'm assuming that means that this lumber basically stayed dunked longer. But a lot of the other ones were 0.15. This is 0.23, so it's a larger amount of copper. Copper is a natural antibacterial agent. And so this lumber is going to resist bacteria, microbial growth, all that kind of stuff for a longer period of time. And that critical structural component means that this would be the same as if it was a foundation for a house. Sometimes you see this on below grade foundations, that sort of thing. So this is a much higher grade of pressure treat. This took about 2 weeks for me to get. So I talked to my BFS rep, Lindsay, a while back, made sure I had this before I got here. And you're gonna see when we start framing this, we're also gonna use pressure treated plywood on the deck, basically on top of this, so that any splashback, things like that. And then also, I'm gonna take a detail that I used to use a lot in my houses, where we're gonna take a 2-foot rip of pressure treated 1/2-inch plywood before I put my zip on. You could obviously bring the zip to the ground and do a higher level of waterproofing on that, but I really like that extra, hey, I know this thing's basically sitting on the ground, so we really wanna make sure that any water that gets in there is gonna be able to dry and not start a rot function. So let's let the guys keep going. We got a couple time-lapse cameras. You're seeing here that we're basically getting this pad as level as possible. One thing to note here, we're in a pretty rocky soil. I don't have a lot of clay, so I'm not gonna have a lot of heave movement. If you were building this shed in a northern climate where you had freeze-thaw issues, one nice thing about these blocks is we can level this in the future, and that's something to think about. Hey, if I'm worried about freeze-thaw, how can I level this deck in the future? So you could, in a northern climate, go below your frost line and do a concrete pier. That's certainly an option. In our case down here in Texas, I didn't need to go to that extent. We don't really have much freeze. I have no frost line where I am here, so these Tuff blocks are a perfect choice. You can also use these for ground level decks too. This is a really nice block. I've used these several times. They're pretty affordable. We ordered a case in, they got delivered via UPS, so they're pretty easy to get to. With that being said, let's let the guys keep going on the ground level deck portion of the shed build. We'll pick it up in a bit. Okay, let's talk fasteners for a minute, and the hardware that you need to build a shed, or of course a deck, is going to be similar. So first off, if you're used to seeing a product like this is a Simpson, commonly referred to as a hurricane tie. This is going to be used between the top plate and the rafters. If you look at these, they're a little bit shiny, and this happens to be an H2.5A strap. This is a galvanized product, but it's electro galvanized, which means that there's a real thin layer of zinc, which is going to protect the steel from corrosion. When we use this on interior purposes or generally dry locations, like if we use this inside the shed, no problem. But as we get to a spot like a deck, especially a deck that's got deck boards, we need to go up from a standard galvanized to either a hot dip galvanized or even better, stainless. Now there's actually 2 varieties of stainless. There's a 304, sometimes you'll see 305, and then there's a 3/16 stainless. As we go to the higher numbers, we've got a higher level of corrosion resistance. So if you're in a saltwater environment, you're building on the coast, you want to make sure that everything on the outside of the house is 3/16 stainless. For us inland, where we're doing it for corrosion resistance, but we don't have salt water in the air, 304, 305 is going to be just fine. So you're going to notice, for instance, my quick drive screws that we're going to screw our pressure treated plywood to our pressure treated joists. This is a 304 quick drive collated. And then my siding nails that I've got here, also the lower grade of stainless. We don't need to go up to the 3/16. On joist hangers, if we're going to be using galvanized joist hangers, we want to use hot dipped galvanized nails on there. The way you can tell the difference between standard galvanized and hot dipped, the hot dip nails are going to be a little rougher, a little more coarse. They're a little more matte finished as well, and they kind of have a rougher finish to them. That process of hot dip galvanizing puts a much thicker coat of zinc on the outside, which is going to give that steel its corrosion resistance. But of course, bumping up to stainless is going to be even better on the corrosion resistance. So it's really up to you. Let's think about where we're building, what we're building, that sort of thing. Of course, a shed actually has generally more coverage in terms of rain, keeping rain off of the deck and the joists than a standard deck would be. So, you know, I would say generally speaking, galvanized, hot dip galvanized, we're going to be okay with. If we're building decks though, we are going to be building a deck on this job. A lot of times we want to go up to stainless if we're really looking to make that deck last the longest and not have any corrosion resistance. Also, sometimes you want to think about, hey, is that deck up in the air where I can see those fasteners in the future? People that can see those fasteners, and if you see rust coming off of them, doesn't give people a very good feeling about your deck and its long-term ability to keep you safe on there. So that can be an idea too. Just think about what we can see and what we can't see. A little bit of surface rust may not hurt us as much if we're not in a coastal environment, but if we're in a spot where we can see it, you may think about upgrading. Another thing that I really like about Simpson is they've got a lot of collated products as well. You're gonna see we're gonna be using this quick drive gun to put all of our deck screws down. They've also done a real nice job of collated fasteners. For instance, this is the gun that we've got that will use these collated nails for our siding. These are really handy to use. And then lastly, we've got the quick stick gun that we're gonna be using instead of these hurricane straps to fasten the top plates to the rafters above. And that's a really nice screw. That's a fairly modern invention. And we're gonna be doing it on the shed here just because we did it on the house, not as much because we're worried about drywall, let's say, pooching out from a fastener. It also is really, really quick, right? One screw up rather than multiple nails on a connector like this. Let's get back to the shed build. All right, y'all, as you can see, once the foundation gets level, this project goes really, really quickly. So we talked about those pressure-treated joists, basically building a ground level deck. We topped it with some 3/4 pressure-treated plywood. Now there are certainly grades of pressure-treated plywood. I didn't go to the marine grade, so this is a lower grade of pressure-treated plywood. But then you're gonna notice once we started that, we glued it down and we screwed it. Now we did screw that with some stainless screws. We used that collated quick drive gun from Simpson, and you can see, boy, the guys absolutely fly through that process. That quick drive gun, we love it. They make a stand-up version of that as well that you can actually stand up and be doing that. But this one is the standard gun, goes incredibly quickly. They make a bunch of different stainless screws, but I really like stainless whenever we're both nailing or screwing into pressure treated because it's gonna mean it's gonna be really long lasting. Also, you're not typically gonna see collated screws in particular in hot dip. You might be able to get collated nails, but not screws. So once we got that deck screwed down, the framing went super fast. We actually framed these walls using the Builder's FirstSource Ready Frame system. So by the way, this shed plan, all available online. I'll put that in the description below. But if you're a Builder's FirstSource builder, this plan you can grab from those guys, and this would be super easy for you to build for any of your customers. And as I said earlier, this one happens to be 8 by 12. You could easily do 8 by 16 or 8 by 20. No big deal. My shed was a little bit bigger, but this one we had a more limited capacity, so we only went with 8 by 12 in this backyard here. We framed with standard 8-foot tall walls, and then you're gonna notice that our trusses have a single pitch to them. Boy, those trusses were super easy too, by the way. You could have gone single rafters, but these trusses allowed us to have a decent amount of pitch on the roof, which really we wanted because we're gonna be putting some Atlas shingles on this roof, just like the main house is gonna have. So we needed enough pitch to make those shingles work. Typically, you're gonna wanna see a 3 or a 412 at a minimum pitch needed for a shingled roof. So that's what we did here, was that 412 pitch. A couple other things you wanna notice though, when we started framing those walls, the first layer of sheathing, instead of starting with zip system sheathing, because we're so low to the ground, we actually did in another pressure-treated plywood. Now this is 1/2-inch pressure-treated plywood. And again, you gotta be specific on your nails. We use a collated stainless nail on there from Simpson, but we ran that plywood on a 2-foot rip. So basically we bought 4x8 sheets, ripped those in half, and then nailed those on that bottom 2-foot section. From there up, the guys are just about ready to start running our zip system sheathing. And then because that zip system sheathing already has that green waterproof facer, all we need to do is tape our seams on that to be watertight and airtight on the outside. But on the pressure-treated plywood, we're actually gonna run a full layer of zip system tape on top of that. So when we start our siding later, you're gonna notice there's this big black band around the base of the house, and then the siding will go on top of that. We're actually gonna space our siding off the main house though, using some 1x material to form a rain screen. That's gonna be your best practice for sheds, for houses, really any climate zone. that gets 20 inches or more of rain. With that being said, let's let the crew get back to work here. We're gonna start on sheathing. We're gonna be putting our roof decking down really, really quickly. And then you're gonna see this deck is, gosh, it's going together quick. I mean, this is about 7 or 8 hours in on day one, and we're to this stage already. So, I mean, we're probably talking another full day tomorrow to finish the sheathing. So let's let the crew get back to work and we'll watch the progress. Okay guys, shed build, great progress. This is the morning of day 2 and it's looking really good. You can see the black zip tape on the bottom. We've basically made our own version of zip system sheathing by using their tape all the way around the bottom 2 feet, which is on top of that pressure treated plywood. Now, frankly, if you use zip to the ground, you could use that same detail. That'd be a good detail. It's just giving extra forgiveness to anything that's nailing through and kind of sealing off those nail holes. We also ran a strip of plywood down through the door sill. You can see the guys cut off the 2x4 bottom plate that ran through the door. And then we're gonna run a piece of zip tape across there and some stretch tape to make a good sill. We don't have the door on site today, so we'll be coming back to set that. We added some barge rafters on the right and left to mimic the same overhang as the front of the house. So that's what those flat 2x4s are that you're seeing down the sides. And then we're just using some standard OSB roof decking. We're gonna be using the same Atlas Pinnacle Extreme shingles like the rest of the house has. And so this shed is really gonna look like the rest of the house, with one exception. We're gonna be using some standard James Hardie on this project rather than the artisan siding that we did on the rest of the house, just to save a little bit of cost. And this is kind of hidden in the back of the yard. So it'll get painted like the rest of the house, but we'll have a few details that'll be a little less expensive, especially those mitered corners, which look amazing. They take some time, which means labor, right? So we're just gonna be using some standard 1x4 Hardie on these corners. Same tape details like we've done everywhere else. We also ordered an extra Pella window to match the house when we ordered the house package. So that window's stocked and ready to go. Let's let the guys finish up the exterior details, and when we get started on Rainscreen, I'm gonna go through some of the Rainscreen and siding details for durability. So let's let these guys get back to work. All right, we're gonna be using a zip Rainscreen product. If you've not seen this before, we use this on the main house, and I really like this product. It's, in my mind, really dual purposed. It has one side that has a kind of a WRB on it. This is a water resistive barrier on one side. It's black and it's vapor open. On the back side, you're gonna see that there's a 3D mesh. If you zoom in close here, you'll see that this is I think they call it an entangled mesh. It's basically a 3D plastic nub that if you look at it from the side, this is gonna space our siding or whatever cladding we've got off of the surface by about 1/4 inch. It's not a huge rain screen. If we were in a really rainy climate that was getting, 35, 40 inches plus of rain, we'd wanna do a thicker rain screen. But this is great because it goes up super fast. And I'm gonna be using it actually differently than what the manufacturer shows. On the main house, we put this face forward. And if I was doing brick, stucco, stone, anything that's masonry, the beauty of this face out is that it makes sure that this air gap that's created here is not getting filled with mortar or other cementitious material. So there's always some drainage and drying behind, let's say, stucco or brick where the masons had mortar filling the cavity. In this case though, in the shed, we're doing James Hardie siding. We're doing the standard siding, not the artisan like we did in the house. So I'm actually gonna run this backwards, where I'm gonna put this WRB up against the zip system sheathing and have this face out so that my air gap on here is facing the Hardie. I'm not worried about masonry filling this cavities, right? Because the hardy, when it goes up against this, is not going to be able to compress this. So when I install the hardy, if you look down on some of that hardy when it's being installed, you'll notice that you're going to be able to see that 1/4 inch gap, which is going to add some extra forgiveness to that hardy. It's also going to help the paint film last that much longer, because if it does get wet, or when it gets wet, it's going to be able to dry to the back side or the front side. We're also going to run this all the way up to our eaves before we put our details for our soffit on. So this is actually going to vent the siding into the ventilated soffit space. So this is a good detail. I really like this product. It's inexpensive. We ordered enough when we did the house to have it for the shed. So let's let the guys get back to work and staple this on. All right guys, painters did an amazing job. My carpenters did a great job. It really took just a hair over 1 day to build the shed, plus the paint job. I love how it turned out though. We got that kind of modern shed roof. We've got that nice Pella window on the side that helps match the house. If you didn't recognize the house, this is the Reisinger build project that we've been building in partnership with builders FirstSource. And I like how the house matches. Now we didn't do artisan siding like the house had. This is just standard James Hardie siding. But what's cool is in this back corner where this pad is located, we're going to locate our Champion home standby generator back here, which kind of sheds the view, pun intended, from the house. It'll also help mitigate a little bit of the sound from that generator while it's running. And then let's take a quick tour of the inside. We did some Therma-Tru double doors to get into the shed. That way if you had a tractor or something you wanted to put in here. I also want to make mention that this is a modular size. This is 8 foot wide, which is basically 2 4x8 sheets in width. And then we size this as 12 foot, so it's an 8 by 12, but we could have absolutely done any other module in a 4 foot dimension. An 8 by 8 shed, 8 by 12, 8 by 16, 8 by 20, 8 by 24. We did have some neighborhood restrictions on height and setback and that sort of thing, so that's one reason why we went with this size. But I want to make mention that this shed is a vented shed. We wouldn't want to insulate this as it is because I purposefully left this as a vented attic space. See the holes that we drilled in those bird blocks? We put a bug screen in there, drilled those holes so the vented Hardie soffit is actually ventilating the shed space as well, so there'll be some amount of air exchange in here. Now, we didn't put any other finishes. We didn't paint the inside. This is that pressure-treated plywood on the base. That's that pressure-treated sheathing, and this is the zip system sheathing. You probably could turn this into a kind of a detached home office if you wanted to work out of this space. We could put a mini split on the wall somewhere in here. We would hang sheetrock and insulate the outer perimeter of this house. So that could be something that someone might do in the future, but this is really just intended as shed space. Now remember, you can buy these plans through BFS if you're a current BFS customer. So if you're a builder watching this, if you're not in a BFS location though, you can see this would be pretty straightforward for you to draw yourself and you to build. Don't forget about those details for durability, like especially the higher grade pressure treat that we used on top of those blocks. I think this shed's gonna be around for a long, long time to come. Hey, one quick thing I wanted to clarify that didn't get done before we shot this video. If you look on the base of this shed, actually let's do it right here. See how you can still see some of the zip tape right here underneath this door? We're gonna need to cover that. We don't wanna leave that exposed. So I'm either gonna put a trim board here or we'll put a piece of black metal flashing that will cover that up. We don't want any of that zip tape still exposed after we're all done. So I just thought I'd make mention of that in case you saw that while we shot the video. Guys, if you're not currently a Build Show subscriber, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content every Tuesday and every Friday. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Reisinger Build.